Hello, everyone. Welcome back to this week's Cedarville Stories Podcast. I'm Mark Weinstein, and today on the program, I am talking with David Molina, a freshman at Cedarville University who is studying nursing. But that's just part of his story. David is a missionary kid who grew up in Cuba. His parents recently moved to Columbus, Ohio, to start a Spanish-speaking church. David and his brother Pablo are students at Cedarville, and I think you're really going to be inspired by David's story today. So pay close attention and enjoy today's Cedarville Stories Podcast with David Molina. David, it's great to have you in studio. We met a few months ago on campus, and your story was fascinating to me because, and we'll get into this at greater depth, but there haven't been, or maybe there hasn't been any Cuban-born students at Cedarville University. We'll talk about that later, which you are. But I'm interested in learning how you first learned of Cedarville. Was it when you were back home in Cuba, or was it after your parents and your family moved to Columbus, Ohio to start a Spanish-speaking church?
Yes. Basically, when we moved here, we as family started in the process for getting ready to plant the church.
Yeah.
In this particular case, the Hispanic church, that was the main reason we came here. And we started to hear about mostly from everybody, friends, family, and partners in ministry. We as family are a missionary family from ABWE. So everybody was recommending us as first option, Cedarville University. And they knew that my brother and I, we were interested in pursuing our studies. And, they were advising us to go to Cedarville, and we started to be curious about it.
Okay, well, we're glad you and your brother have joined us. So you guys, at the time of our recording today, you are wrapping up your freshman year at Cedarville. So in this first year, what are some of the highlights for you? What have you enjoyed? What are some great memories for you?
I would say the very first time in my life seeing how to approach different aspects of life, like in this case, like science, politics, from a very Christian perspective.
Yeah.
For me, that was like, wow, I love this. I would say that's one of my favorite parts from Cedarville. And in this first year, I have been enjoying every single time that I have been just in classes, seeing how the professors start by praying.
Right.
I was raised in a country that was so different.
Right.
And seeing how they combine everything with the perspective of the Bible. And also, I would say, making very good friends here.
From people from all over the world, probably, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Not just America, but other countries too.
Yep.
That's neat. So when I was researching your story, I didn't find anyone else ever in the history of the university, and I could be wrong here, but I didn't see anyone who came from Cuba. So I think you and your brother are the first Cuban-born Cedarville students. Does that bring special meaning to you?
In different senses, I would say yes. In one part, I feel like happy, a little proud in the sense that I am probably, and my brother, the only ones that are representing an entire culture.
Yeah.
That makes me to feel a little like special in some sense. And at the same time, I would say that in sometimes I miss like interact with friends, in this case, Cuban friends, that they make me feel bound to our common culture.
Yeah.
So
like, is it possible for Cuban students to come to America, to come to college? Because you're a little different because you came to America first, then you went to college. But are Cuban youth, Cuban college students age, are they able to go to an American university?
It's extremely hard for different reasons.
What are the reasons?
I would say mostly they don't know that they have the opportunity.
Okay.
And the economic part.
Okay.
Most of them need some like families that receive them here. Probably also the legal aspects. But personally, also, I can say that that is something I am very near to find out if it's possible or not.
So when your family made the decision to move to Columbus, Ohio, to start the church, what was the process that you had to go through? One, to what? I assume you needed to get a visa. Did you have any issues? Were there any obstacles, struggles to getting you from Cuba to Ohio?
Yes. The first thought that we had as family was going to Spain and planting a Hispanic church there. But it happens that the missionary that reached my parents in the 90s, he's from here, from Ohio.
Is that someone with ABWE?
He's related.
Okay.
And he's from here, from Ohio, and he and my dad needed to have a ministry conversation in Cuba. And it happened that they both were talking about a possibility of us as family coming here.
Okay.
To serve the Lord here, planting a Hispanic church. Yeah. We started praying about that. And we, in the very first steps, we started to see that very probably God could want that for us. And then we started to continue going in that direction. And it was extremely hard to get a visa.
Why?
Different reasons. I would say the main reason is the tension between both governments. I would say that.
So there was strife between the Cuban government and the United States government.
Yes.
Okay.
For political reasons.
How long did it take you to get a visa so that you could actually move over here?
With ABWE, we started in the process of getting a religious visa. But at that point, that's another reason it's extremely hard, especially at that time. The American embassy was closed in Cuba.
Okay.
So we needed to go to Guyana. So English Guyana is between Brazil and Venezuela.
Okay.
I didn't know where was Guyana before that.
You learned though.
And then in our appointment, our visa was denied. Then we started to start thinking, start praying, God, is this your willing for us? Otherwise, it's a good time to know it.
Right.
And we started to pray. Exactly the same day, we got an answer from God. And the president of the United States at that moment, he announced that he was opening a new visa for people from Cuba, Venezuela, and Nicaragua.
Wow.
It's a humanitarian parole. That's the way we came here. And that was a very, very obvious open door from God for us.
Sure it was.
And then the case was that we applied, but we needed to stay in Guyana without any answer from the government, from the American government.
Okay.
And without knowing for sure that we were coming here, we stayed in Guyana 8 months there.
Sure.
And then we received the approval of the visa, and we just came here.
So the visa, and I'm not aware of the process for a visa. So is there an amount of time that you can stay in the United States with your visa, or is it indefinite?
It's a temporal visa.
Okay.
But since God, we, as Cubans, we have different opportunities for applying for different kind of visas here in U.S. And right now we're in the process of getting our residency. We applied already.
Okay. So you applied for residency. Are you applying to become U.S. citizens?
Probably in the future is an option.
Okay. So now that you've been in the United States for almost a year, I would assume you can see a difference between communist Cuba and freedom in the United States. What are some of those freedoms that you resonate with that are really special to you? Because for many years, you lived in an oppressed state.
Yeah. I would say the freedom to speak, the freedom to disagree with an idea.
Yeah.
And also you can disagree with authorities in a polite way. That's something that I appreciate here in this country of freedom.
Right.
And it's something that I am like in somehow trying to learn the limits of that, and somehow how to know how to use my freedom in the best way possible. And there are limitations in Cuba of freedom for churches.
Right.
Our church was planted in our house.
Right.
And you cannot preach if you're in the military, if you're a policeman. You cannot preach in schools, in governmental offices. You can't. You can preach to people, to your neighbors, friends, but there are a lot of limits about the church in Cuba.
So when you and your family first experienced that freedom of speech, was that difficult for you to accept? Were you cautious because of what your upbringing was like?
Well, in my last year in Cuba, as a missionary kid, I was raised up in a different way.
Okay.
In that sense, also going to other countries, and like Ecuador, we were missionaries there for years. And that opened my mind about freedom. What is freedom and what is tyranny? Okay. And my last year in Cuba, especially in high school, my parents were very concerned about me disagreeing with professor about communism, for example. Right. So,
yeah. Let's pivot a little bit and let's talk about your time here at Cedarville. So when you enrolled last year, you were pursuing microbiology, but that has since changed to nursing. Why the switch?
Well, when I was finishing high school in Cuba, I had a love for science, especially biology. And that made me to consider about different careers in that field. And medicine was one, but it wasn't the only one. Okay. And the reason that I decided that medicine was for me was that focus on the human being, caring and saving lives. And from a Christian perspective.
Humanly and spiritually?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And especially that is something that I'm learning here in Cedarville. Yeah. How to combine those. Yeah. And when I came here to US, I chose medicine as my career in Cuba when I finished high school. And as I was sharing before, we came from a very long process as missionary family of transition to another country. And when I came here, I realized that medicine was a little longer.
Yeah, you don't just get an opportunity to practice medicine after 4 years of college. You have a lot more schooling to go through. So that drove you maybe away from medicine and into nursing.
Yes, that was one option. I would say nursing is especially different in practice here in US than in Cuba. Okay. In different senses. That made me to pass through a process to realizing what is nursing and what I can do with nursing here. Okay. And basically the reason I switched to nursing is a lot of practical opportunities to work and to do missions, even though in the meantime that I'm studying. Sure. And that is in the now. I don't need to wait like 5 years to do that.
That's right. So you still have 3 more years of schooling here at Cedarville. What do you envision doing when you graduate, you earn that degree in nursing? How do you want to use your education for work and for ministry?
Well, I would like to start sharing that in some moment in the middle of that transition, personally, I experienced a lot of things in my personal relationship with Christ. And one of those was a calling that I received to dedicate my life to God. And I finished in my knees giving my life to Christ for service. And at that moment, I thought that probably what God wanted from me was changing from medicine to theology to be a pastor. I don't know. And when I came here, I started to realize that I can use medicine for missions.
Sure.
So ultimately, I would say that's what I am planning, what I want. I keep the idea of being a doctor, a physician in the future. So I'm trying. That's something my advisors here in Cedarville are working with me. I'm trying to get a pre-med and nursing at the same time. It's really hard. I don't know if any student before did that, but that's something I'm trying. So far now I'm focusing more in nursing.
Okay.
To getting success.
But pre-med's on the table.
It's on the table. And at some point I would like to be a medical missionary.
Any idea where you would like to go? Would you want to go back to Cuba and be a medical missionary, or stay in the States, or someplace else? Has the Lord brought any country to heart?
I would say I need a lot of confirmation.
Sure you do.
From God. But I can say this. I feel something like this need that my country has, especially for medical mission. So it's a high possibility that I'm going to go back.
Go back to Cuba.
With medicine and the gospel in the hands. So
what is your brother studying here at Cedarville?
He's studying psychology.
Psychology. What's his interest? Obviously, psychology, but how do you see him using that?
I will see him using that and his personal testimony and story for advising people, probably advising young people that he can, or that people can identify with him. I absolutely can see him in any ministry of counseling, people that need the very God's word for their lives, but also professional advice. I see him like that.
Sure. So your parents have started now 2 churches at least, maybe more. I'm aware of 2, one in Cuba and one here. House Church in Cuba and the one here in Columbus. What are the challenges for starting a church? How do you go about doing that? Is that hard?
In the process of planting this last church, I was wondering the same question.
Really?
How does this work? And I cannot understand it. Probably my parents neither. It's a very God's work. We just share the gospel with a lot of people. Yeah. A lot of people say no. A lot of people say later. And since God, a lot of people say yes. I accept Christ in my heart. And for me, it's a miracle. That's probably one of the best experiences that I have had in my life. Just seeing, like, from nothing, from zero.
Yeah.
Just going to a place, start sharing love, start to sharing our lives as people, as missionaries.
Yeah. But
ultimately sharing Jesus. And just to see how people that probably never heard the gospel in a proper way, and very hard people, how they can change a lot, and how the Holy Spirit can transform their lives.
Yeah. I'm interested in you telling our audience just the struggles that your dad went through, because I know there were struggles with the government. He was threatened as a church planner in Cuba. Can you speak to what your dad experienced, and then maybe how that has impacted you?
Persecution for the church in Cuba. Mm-hmm. It depends of a lot of factors. And for some churches, it's almost nothing. For some churches and pastor, it's a lot. In the case of our family, the very thing that bothered the Cuban government was the idea of we are not going to church. My parents, they were starting a new church.
Okay.
They see that like dangerous. It's not like they're not, for them it's not enough just going to church. They're making the church stuff bigger. And they're unbelievers. They don't understand our purpose.
Right.
But for that reason, the police, the security department wasn't happy with my dad was doing, starting a church in our house.
Mm-hmm.
In the communist law, it's not allowed to plant any new churches or any, let's say, new denomination in the sense of a group of churches. And they only permit those churches that were planting before communism.
Before communism.
So what we do as church planters is planting churches in our houses.
Okay.
In that way, they shouldn't be bothered by that.
Right.
But they do.
But they were, because your dad wasn't he threatened to be arrested a lot?
Yes. He had I don't know a specific number, but a lot of times he got a citation to the police, a person talking to him, trying to make him feel scared, probably.
Right.
Threatening, and trying to stop what he was doing.
Right.
Trying to convince him in different ways. In every situation, they tried with different strategies.
Like what did they try? Do you know?
I'm sure. I was very little at that time, but
okay.
I know how they think and how they work, and I have seen a lot of testimonies in the now and the present,
sure,
of similar stories, and they start probably in the first sedation trying to make you to feel scared.
Yeah, scared.
Probably in the next one, he tried to make you feel that they're your friend, and like in a kindly way to convince you. Different strategies
to stop doing what you're doing.
Yeah, using psychology to stop you.
Right.
And my dad kept doing what God called him to do, to plant this church. And when our church started to grow up, our members were like 50, 60. That was in our garage. And at some point they stopped it.
They stopped harassing your dad?
Yeah, they stopped it.
Okay. So what did you learn? I mean, you were a young boy more than you are now. Any lessons that you learned from either seeing those stories or hearing about those stories?
Sadly, Cuba, even though it's a beautiful country with beautiful people, beautiful culture, I love my country. Sadly, it's a country in darkness for the government. Very evil government that we have. And the only light that Cuba has is the gospel. And I am able to see that in miraculous ways. And for me, it's beautiful to see throughout the history, in the Cuban history of the church, to see that nothing can stop the church and what God is doing right now.
With God, all things are possible.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I'm going to try to wrap up with maybe 3 final questions. So what advice would you give someone watching or listening to this program, or to students in general who feel called to missions? What advice would you give them?
I would say starting to be a better disciple, to grow up in your personal relationship with Jesus, and just be patient. God is going to reveal you. It's beautiful to see how sovereign is God, revealing to us every detail that He wants for us. But at the same time, don't be afraid of going. Try going to different places, experiencing, trying. In that way, that's the way God is going to confirm what's your specific calling to any specific place or any specific ministry.
Yeah. At Cedarville, have you been able to be part of any Go mission trips?
Right now, I cannot go out of United States.
Because of your visa?
Yes, we're in that transition.
Okay.
In the last spring break, a friend of mine, they have a missionary group, and they were a group of students from Cedarville. They were going to Cuba.
To where?
To Cuba, to my country.
They were going back to...
Yeah.
And you couldn't go with them?
Yeah, I couldn't. That was so sad. I'm planning to go next year, probably trying different countries.
Okay.
I would love to see how medical missions looks like.
Yeah.
Right now, what we're doing is with the help of Cedarville University, we are going and we are gathering a group of students, specifically those who speak Spanish, and we're going to the church in Columbus to help in different ways.
Is it your dad's church? Or?
Yes.
Okay. So what will change, or what has changed that this year you couldn't leave the country, and maybe next year you can go on a missions trip outside of the country? What will have changed that will allow you to do that?
First, that we receive our green card, our residency.
Okay.
And we're in that process. It's taking a little longer than expected, but we're just waiting in the Lord, trusting Him.
Okay.
And I would say if current laws, changes in politics, they don't get like too crazy, I could go to any country. Okay.
My last question, and then we'll leave it there, is, and you kind of answered it a little bit ago, but what encouragement would you give listeners, those who are listening and watching today's program, who feel called to step out in faith, even when the path seems uncertain, fearful?
There's going to be moments where it seems like nothing makes sense to what God was calling you, or to what you were feeling in that moment. You can think like that. Probably was just a feeling.
Yeah.
And problems, troubles, they're going to come more than ever. But the victory is guaranteed in Jesus Christ. And I have been able to see that.
David, our time is up, but I want to thank you for spending time with me today on the Cedarville Stories Podcast. Your story is important to tell. I hope that the people watching or listening are encouraged by your story to step out in faith, even when the road looks difficult or uncertain. And again, thanks for joining me this week on the podcast.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you for listening to the Cedarville Stories Podcast, brought to you by Cedarville University. Be sure to come back next week when we'll share another Cedarville story for God's glory.